Take your CJ7 all the way to 11. Jeepin' with cool guy.
Here's a preview of what the results are of this video. And what I wanted to start off this video with, like and subscribe, provide comments, let me know how we're doing, and maybe suggest some videos that would help you guys out. Anything that's out there that you are experiencing on your CJ7, I am by no means a master of this. I have just self-educated myself on all of this stuff. So the only information I have, I've extrapolated from other people. So hopefully I can be a source for you. So like and subscribe. Let's get to it. Now I have a 1984 CJ7, and it was originally a Renegade. So in the process of my restoration, I put everything back as close as I possibly could to the original factory setup. And I've gone to great extents to not only educate myself, but to also find those pieces. I put in the cheap Smitty built ones. They're black. I mean, they're fine, they're comfortable, but they're just not original. So what I wanted to do was to find a pair of original Renegade seats, and I've done that. As you can tell, it's dilapidated, like most of them are. There's also some other issues to it. One of those issues is broken body mounts or support mounts. This one, the bolt is completely broken off, and if you look really close in here, you can see where it is actually cracked, and this piece is separated out from that. Let me show you the other problem. This one is gone entirely. Like, this is just completely broken through. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take off all of the bowl clips. It's the thing that actually holds the fabric onto the frame of the seat. And then we're going to take off the covers. And then we're going to actually pull out and separate the foam base from the frame. Then we're going to restore the frame, get it all fixed up, welded, put into place. And then we'll take all the covers over to our local upholstery guy, who apparently is really awesome, and I'm excited about this. And then he's going to redo not only the foam, but the outer upholstery and the fabric, and this thing is going to be brand new and stronger than the original. So here we go. Alright, to be honest with you, I already took all of them out, at least for the bottom thing here. But what these things are, it's this little diamond shaped clip that goes through the fabric, and it latches through a hole in the metal of the frame of the seat. Get out a pair of pliers, and what you need to do is just literally just twist and pull these things off. Yeah, you could just rip these things off, but I don't. What I want to do is I want to be able to give the covers in as good a condition as I can, so that the upholsterer can make as accurate of a pattern as possible. Now we can flip this thing upside down and listen to all the rust fall out. Awesome. Now, why am I doing all of this instead of just taking the seat over to an upholsterer and let him do it or her do it? It's because I want to learn how these things actually go together. Apparently there's a clip back here that's holding the back part of the lower cover to the base. And make sure you've got your tetanus shot. This thing is really crazy. Okay. Hopefully that's it. And all of the nasty crud that's in there. Something else fall out. Oh, hey! Found a nickel! It'd be kind of fun if it was like one of those buffalo nickels. Okay, this one is 1987. Oh, that's funny. Okay. The lower cover has a I don't want to call it a sheath. It's almost like a cuff. It goes up underneath the upper cover. This is kind of hard plastic, so it's kind of hard to get out. All right. All right, I was trying to figure out why this thing doesn't slide off. There is a metal support rod that runs up through this piece in here that gives the undulation of the seat over the top of the foam, so it just doesn't sit flat. I could probably take off the front. Let's see if the front will come off. Yeah. See, it's right down in here. There's this metal rod, and this one's completely deteriorated. Okay, right down in here, you can see that here's one bowl clip that tore apart. This one's disintegrated. And it looks like there's this way 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Cool. Got that one out. Apparently they made the seats just like they made the rest of the CJ. Rust proof. Okay, that's the underside of the seat. It's your main foam. Kinda wonder how many people have farted on this sucker. Alright, last bowl clip for this cover. Yeah, that's a prime piece of grade A, worn out. Blech. There is a metal rod that runs the course of the inside of this foam piece. I don't know how they made these. They must have made them like blow mold or something like that, foam. And then, because this thing is actually molded over the top of the frame of the seat. It's very interesting. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to take the foam off of the actual seat frame. So before we go any further, wanted to show you some of the details that make up the Renegade seat, and then we can talk about the Laredo seat, and then I'll show you a Golden Eagle, the tan denim seat here in just a second. The Renegades had the high back seats in them, and the high back seats all had these horizontal kind of stitch pads in them. The one real big difference between this and the aftermarket restoration covers is that there's this lumbar kind of support system or little pouch push out that's down here, and the aftermarkets don't have these. So you can kind of see there's a little bit of an extra stitch in there, a piece of fabric as the thing kind of buckles out. And the same thing for the actual bottom part cover. Right here, there's an extra seam so that this kind of pushes up higher than everything else. The aftermarkets don't have that. Now what makes this the Renegade is these horizontal stripes, like I had said before. If this was a Laredo, the Laredo would have these kind of like trim lines that go down all the way through and across the bottom. These are usually another color. So like if you had a honey colored interior, this would be a darker reddish brown. So let me grab a Golden Eagle seat here real quick. The Golden Eagles were only from 76 to 79. Within that period of time, they had the Golden Eagle, and then they also had the Golden Eagle Levi's denim trim. So the denim trim is the exact same from 76 to 79. It's just that in 79, apparently AMC lost the rights to Levi's. So the big difference there is that the buttons that are on these seats from 76 to 78 all have, look just like the Levi's buttons on the jeans. They have the Levi Strauss actually in these little buttons. And in 79, since they didn't have the contract, they kept everything the same, they just put in different buttons. So the button just doesn't have the Levi's on it. There's another version of this where it's actually blue. It's a blue denim interior. So that is the Levi's edition. I think it may have just been an upgrade on the Renegade, blue Levi's version of it. But if you wind up getting a Golden Eagle trim, then you could get the Levi's tan version of it. I don't think that you could do a Levi's tan version without it being a Golden Eagle. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that was the case. Anyways, so in 1980, that's when they went to the high back seats. So everything pre that were the low back seats. So you're getting an idea of the different trim styles that went with this. All right, now that we've got the bottom off, we're going to take the top part off. Pretty much the exact same as the bottom. Just make sure you got all your bowl clips taken out. Yeah, I think I've got them all removed. Actually, to remove the top cover, there's a metal bar that goes right across this kind of indentation line. And there's about I think there's 2 bowl clips in here. So you have to turn the cover inside out and peel it back up over itself. Struggle your way through getting this thing out. There we go. Do the same thing with the back. Just getting it over this bottom hump. Alright, well, here we go. Now we've got it peeled back up on itself and off. Yay. That's kind of cool. There's the original serial number. And okay, so we're going to pull this all the way back up to that point where that metal bar comes across. There's one right here. There's one right here. So it looks like 2. But you can see how there's this metal wire. And the metal wire goes through a loop in the fabric, and the bowl clip holds it to the frame and pulls the fabric back down into the actual frame of the chair. Kind of creates that nice indentation. So let's take those off real quick. Alright. Well, those were probably the most difficult ones of all of it. I don't know why. Alright, there you go. This rod is pretty much rusted out, so the upholsterer will do all that for you. Now that we got that undone, this theoretically should just slide right off. And there we go. I want to point out real quick, I was telling you about that specific kind of lumbar support in the Renegades, and I think the Laredo has them too. But you can see how there's this extra foam bump out, and that's what that extra seam is for, is to accommodate that extra thick padding pushing out to support your lumbar as you're off-roading. I mean, yeah, I'm sure it's not that important, but to me it's a detail, and this is all about detail. Next is to cut this stuff out. Okay, so the first step to taking off the foam around the bottom is to get yourself a good scraper. This whole bottom channel, outer frame, actually the frame of the bottom seat is just this. All the rest of it is just foam. So you just need to go along and use your chisel to peel it up. And then kind of get underneath here and peel it back, because this is actually an L-shaped bracket that goes all the way around. It's kind of inspiring. There's at least a nice shiny metal here. It just seems to be this outer edge where the rust is kind of sunk in. Just so you know, the support springs, there's 4 of them, and they all run lengthwise of the seat. There aren't any that go this way. They're all this way. And these are held in to a little metal bracket. Now that we've gotten the outer rim all separated out, now go underneath the frame and try and pull the foam away from the base. Another thing you can do that might make this a little bit easier, I don't really know if it does or not, is to pull the springs out through the foam and have yourself a pair of heavy-duty pliers, push it out from underneath its support bracket. So there is all this is an indentation, a cutout in the frame that goes down, and it kind of forms like a cup ledge that the support spring holds onto. So if you push it out through, you can push it down and then pull it out. So there you go. Piece of advice: if you've gotten this far, keep a vacuum cleaner very close, because I'm going to show you why. And that's after I've already vacuumed it. Alright, before I go any further, what I want to do is I want to cut the foam here, separate the foam, the top foam from the bottom foam. Now that we've got this cut away from there and I've separated it out, you can peel this back up and around, and you can see how down in here where we have to push the foam out from underneath this plate. So a pain in the butt, but yes, needs to be done. So I'm gonna go with a screwdriver, hopefully separate it out as much as I can. No, not a screwdriver apparently. See if I can do it with this. That's not working the way I want it to. I have to figure out another way of doing this. Oh no, this may actually be completely pointless, because I don't think that the upholsterer is going to put foam back up underneath this. But anyways, you know, for prosperity's sake, let's do it right. Going from the underside, screwdriver, slide it right up base plate, and just kind of scrape along, try and scrape off any adhesion of that foam to the bottom plate, and then pushing down with your fingers, try and separate it out from this section. Okay, so I just realized something. There is a metal rod that goes all the way around the inner frame, that the bowl clips from the top part clip down into. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out that metal frame, or that metal wire rod, and that way it'll be a lot easier to compress the foam, because I'm fighting against myself here. So grab yourself a box cutter again, find that metal rod. It runs right along here, 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 and here, and just cut it out. I'm telling you, this foam stuff is not easy to cut through. Oh, yes, alright. Finally got that up and around. Perfect. There. Okay, there. So you can kind of see how the foam goes up underneath it, but there you go. That's that lip that I was telling you about. Didn't damage myself too much. And there is your dilapidated foam seat. I'm leaving the top foam on this. Your upholsterer may want to replace it, but this stuff's still in really good shape. And really for this one in particular, it seems that the frames rust out and break down here at the bottom more than they do anything else. So now that we've gotten the foam off, I can see that there's a fair amount of work to definitely do on this one. This right here is the most concerning part, because this basically has rusted through and is cracked. So I'm going to have to flatten this out, bend it back into place. And then over here we've got a snapped off bolt, and you can see how the metal part of the frame has cracked. It seems complicated, but it really isn't. This should be for the most part, kind of an easy fix. The rest of the frame is in really good shape. There's a lot of spots of very clean metal on here, and even where there is rust, it's a little bit of pitting, but it's not rusted through. So the overall frame is in really good shape. When we get this thing back into condition, it's going to be solid. What we're going to do now is start cutting this stuff out. I think I'll probably start with this piece because it's only welded by 2 spot welds here and here. So cutting this out, then grinding that off, and then we'll fabricate this piece. So let's work on fabricating this. Took a detour, decided to try and get rid of as much of the foam and the rust, surface rust, the big stuff, as I possibly could before I cut this thing out. Using an angle grinder to do this with a wire brush. Angle grinder, wire brush. These things are very effective. Although, be very careful with these things because, you know, if you get one of the really strong ones and you catch this thing on an edge, it will jerk it out of your hands. And I did that and it really freaking hurts. Anyways, let me give you a close-up on this and you can see how much this is cleaned up from before. So here's a close-up of the front part. And the good thing about using the wire brush to get all the rust off is you kind of find what you have to work with or what you have to fix. So I've got like a crack up here, and then there's a crack over here, which makes for this thing to not be as stable as I could want it to be. And that's no big deal because that's just a matter of tack welding it and then tack welding it from underneath here too. Big complication is back in here. You can see now that we've got all this kind of cleaned up for the most part. We got some work to do back here. So let's flip it over and take a look at the underside. It's actually in really good shape. You can see I've got some fairly shiny metal here. It's just pretty much from back, about this area back that we've got the big problems. There are a couple rust out spots that we'll just weld in a couple little patch pieces and maybe do some tack welding just to kind of fill some holes. But really the only thing that we need to focus on is the structural part here and the structural part here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish up getting rid of all of the foam and everything like that, because when you paint over this thing you don't want to paint it back over foam. It doesn't do you any good. So use every means possible, all different size wire brushes to get into the little nooks and crannies and the grooves and everything like that. Get out your Dremel tool, get some wire brushes so you can get into all these little tiny places and get the metal as cleaned up as possible. Because when we put the chassis saver on there, this stuff, it's going to wind up sealing all of this, providing it a waterproof surface, and we won't ever have to worry about this thing rusting out again. So, yay, cool, go us. Okay, now we're going to cut out this sucker, this rusted out piece of junk. I'm going to cut it right here at the frame line, and then we'll pull out, grind out the pieces that overlap that are welded into this piece. Keep this as a template so that you can drill your bowl clip holes back into this piece of metal. Alright, getting down to the nitty gritty here. We've pretty much got everything ground down, flattened out as best as we really can, leveled out, and now I'm just getting out the Dremel with small wire brushes and going in and cleaning up all the little gaps and stuff. Make sure we get everything out of this thing that we possibly can. Alright. Let's fabricate some stuff. So this is our rusted out cross member that we just cut out, ground out all the extra stuff for. I'm going to make this out of 16 gauge steel so that this thing's going to be rock and strong. I've just got some plate sheet metal, hot rolled, cold rolled, I'm not really quite sure. Just got it from a local sheet metal place in their scrap thing, and I've used it for various pieces. Let's measure this thing out. Looks like it's 5/16. Roll it around. Looks like it's 1.25 inches in total length or total width. And this thing, this isn't a glamour piece, you know, this isn't exactly like a body panel. This just has to be functional. So there's nothing about this thing that needs to be perfect. It just needs to be folded in a relatively close to a 90-degree angle with some holes punched in it so that you can run the bowl clips. It's going to provide a heck of a lot of support. The original piece really only ran to about a ½ inch in on both sides. I'm going to run this all the way into the hinge part, if you want to call it that, kind of where the angle of the seat starts to bend in, just so I can have much more metal contact, and it'll be ultimately a stronger piece. So it looks like about 15½ inches from this indentation to that indentation. Once I get this thing cut out and cleaned up on the edges, I'm going to measure the halfway mark between this so that we can create our 90-degree fold, very similar to what the original piece was like. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use an angle grinder with just a cutoff blade, and we're just going to notch a nice long straight line about 3/4 of the way, halfway through the actual metal. So this is going to be it'll be a touch and go thing. You just have to be very careful. So that way that when you fold up the metal, it doesn't buckle on itself and it has some place to give. Alright, just finished up cutting the groove. There you go. Nice and straight. So now we're going to fold it. So I don't have a metal folding vise or anything like that, so I'm just going to use a simple bench vise and go along little by little. I'll line the groove up, slot with the top part of the vise, and simply use a hammer and just kind of tap it over. Now we're just going to move on down the piece. Now you start working it back the other way. One piece of advice I will give you on this is if you're creating it, this actually is not at a 90-degree angle in the seat frame, so more like an 80. So you don't have to go perfectly 90 degrees, otherwise you're going to have to bend it back out just to fit to the frame. Right, there we go. We've got it pretty much bent up. When you're done with this, well, close to being done with it, pull it out. If you see if there's any waves in here, you can just use your vise to actually straighten the metal out. It's really kind of a nice nice metal press. But as you can see, that's not all that bad. There's a little bit of a bow to it, but that's just because of the primitive way that we bent the metal. But like I said, this is for the inside of a seat frame, and actually that's not all that bad. That's maybe a 2-degree bend. That's pretty cool. So there you go. Now I want to grab our old school crappy piece, place it on here, mark our holes for the bowl clips, and then use a drill bit and drill some holes. And I'm just going to center punch right in the middle of it. Alright, let's drill some holes. I do recommend this dark thread cutting oil. This stuff helps keep your drill bits nice and cool when you're drilling holes. Let's see, make sure I'm not making too big of a mess. I don't want to cut through and make this weak, but I think that should work. Alright, there we go. That's our 5-hole drilled piece. I've kind of countersank, I guess you could call it, the edges on both sides, so we got a nice clean edge. Make sure that this is free of oil now. Just got finished welding up pretty much everything. So let's take a look at the details of what I just did. First in order was welding in our new cross member, back support if you want to call it that. So I just tack welded it all the way across here and then went back and filled in a full seam, and I did the same thing here. So this thing is as solid as you're going to get. and then I also welded it from the inside, so it is really in there. I mean, this thing is squared up and strong. Welded in where the metal was broken through, and I just went along and tack welded all of that and made sure that I got good penetration there, so it was a really good seam filler. Did the same thing over here. There was a crack that was going down the line. I filled that all up. Filled in a spot here, and then I actually I turned my MIG welder way down, and tack welded this connector piece where one of the bolt clips go. This had rusted through, and this is really easy metal to blow through because it's kind of thinned out a little bit and it's a little rusty. So I cleaned it up and then I was able to tack through it. So I just went and filled in a whole bunch of cracks in the metal with weld and got everything nice and solid and cleaned up. The other thing that I did was that I went and I tack welded the front cross member to the sides. I just ran a couple along here, so because these are only held in with two little tack welds, right here and right here. There's nothing that connects it to the front, so if there's anything that puts any stress on the front part of this or even on the sides, these things could easily break through. And then we also welded in a nut on the other side of that broken off bolt that I don't know if you guys remember earlier on in the video I showed you. So I basically just cut off that bolt and got it out, and then shaved this down with a grinder, and then welded on a steel nut, a four-sided nut. The other side of that is this whole piece had pretty much cracked out or cracked through and had broken off, so I just angle grinded this thing out, got myself a nice little space, and then welded in a good piece of 16 gauge steel into this area. So this is now super solid. And so now I need to measure from the front bolt to the back bolt hole where I'm going to weld in that nut. The way to do this, you can either get the seat slider. This usually goes on the driver's side, or you can use the bracket, the seat bracket that's actually in the Jeep that this thing sits on, it mounts to, and measure the distance between this back nut and the front nut, the bolt holes. This is a little bit easier. So if you have one of these, it's a lot easier to measure. So let's measure this out real quick. It looks like, using my highly scientific measuring device here, that it is 1 foot and a half inch from center to center. Okay, so now let's measure this off, drill a hole, and weld in a nut. Alright, just got this step drilled in holes done, measured out. So we got the bolt clip hole here, and then this is for the welded nut. So now I'm just going to go weld this into place, and then we can chassis saver the bottom part of the frame here, and then it should be all ready to go for the upholsterer. Alright, we are welded in, done, ready to go. Let me show you the other side of this. Okay, you can see how I just welded around the edge of the nut. A good way to do this, to hold it into place if you want to, is to actually take a bolt and screw the nut down onto the bolt through the metal, and then that way it will hold it into place. It'll also keep it straight. But I'm really super happy with the way that this came out. Look, this is the inside of a seat frame. Hopefully nobody ever sees this again. So it doesn't have to be gorgeous, but we've got it all in really good shape, and it is solid as a rock now. Just finished up putting the chassis saver on it, put 2 coats on it, and then I just spray painted the Rust-Oleum over the top of that, just to make sure that I got into all the extra little crevices that I couldn't get with the chassis saver. And that concludes part 1 of the Renegade seat restoration. Hopefully this gives you enough information to take on this task yourself, because really these things are starting to disappear at an exponential rate, and I would love to see some people restoring these things on their own, because just because the thing has a crack in the frame or a busted bolt nut or something like that, or even like this thing's falling apart, doesn't mean that this thing's dead. As you can see, you can totally take these things back to just as good as they were before with a little bit of effort, and keep it all original. And that's ultimately my goal, is to keep this as original as possible.